Good. All right. Hello and welcome everyone. So today I'm going to talk a bit about cryptography and security. You are not going to walk out of here today, unfortunately, as cryptographers. That's going to take a while. So what we're going to do is just do an introduction to security and terminology today, and then incrementally over the next coming many months, work on getting a full grasp of this massive area of technology. So today I'm going to talk about dimensions, how to think about security, terminology, so how to understand what people are talking about, security strength, how strong is an algorithm agility, and anyway, I'm just going to walk it through. So ITU X805 came up with a way of looking at security, and they defined some security dimensions. That's a really good way of understanding security. And to help us all work it through, I'm going to do an example. So we've got Alice, who's that lady just there, and she wants to buy some shares in a company for a certain price at an online stockbroker. So it almost feels like a dated example because she's using a VEU screen there, but anyway, not CRT. But yeah. Anyway, so access control. That is our first dimension. So it protects against unauthorized access or use of resources. And you can think of role-based access control where you have certain roles and they've got certain privileges. So how does access control play into this matrix? How?
What are you asking me?
Yeah.
I'm working on something. I'm just working on something.
You're not going to collaborate.
No. Ask someone. Ask Rob Dawson. There you go.
Rob Dawson. All right, Rob. How would you see access control playing out with Alice and Coolstock.com?
So she would be given access to her login profile. I guess before the access control, there'd be the authorization, so probably keeping, but giving her the ability to log in with some sort of identity, username and password, and then through that she'd get access to her view of the world and not be able to see things like the system administrator might be able to see.
Exactly. So it is access control. In this situation, it's going to let her do stuff with shares, She's a user of the website. She's not an administrator. So she gets to buy and sell shares, but she doesn't get to, say, change, some image on the web page. All right, authentication. That confirms who the identities of the communicating parties and ensures the validity of the claims they're making. So, it provides you assurance that both sides are communicating correctly, are the real parties involved. And let's see. What's your name? Harry. Harry, how does authentication play out? Sorry. How does authentication play out in our example? We've got someone who's trying to use a website. Where does authentication come in?
For the user?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess at the browser level, at the applications level.
Validation of a set of credentials in which they can then authenticate against.
Yeah, well, how it comes together is, you want to know that you're really looking at coolstock.com and not some malicious website. So it has to authenticate to you. But then before you get to log in and trade as if you're Alice, you've got to authenticate that you really are Alice. So you've got to authenticate to the server, but then the server needs to authenticate to you. So you've got mutual authentication happening. Non-repudiation. Okay, so the idea here is that you want to lock people in. If they say they're going to do something, then you want to make sure that they don't jump out and say, oh, I didn't really do that after all. And so in our situation, non-repudiation is going to lock Alice into that share purchase. She said she's going to buy it at $10. If the shares suddenly go through the floorboards and are only worth $2, we don't want her to be able to back out of that transaction. So non-repudiation locks her in. Data confidentiality. So it protects against unauthorized disclosure. And so it it's what you normally think of as encryption. It's making sure that people can't see what the nature of the data is. And in our situation, you've got two parts of data confidentiality. You've got data in flight and data at rest. So data in flight is when data is being transferred. So in the communications link between her and the website, that's data in flight. Data at rest is when it's being stored on disk. So in both of those situations, you need it to be secure. You need it to be confidential. Data integrity, it ensures the accuracy of the data, and so it protects against unauthorized modification. So you don't want to have, when you're communicating with some website, you don't want to have it saying you want to buy 10,000 and then by the time it gets to there, it says 1,000 or 100,000. You want to make sure that the messages are as they intended to be, so they have integrity. Communications, so you want to make sure that the data flows between the endpoints. So if you're dealing with coolstock.com, you don't want it to go via some waypoint that's tapping in and listening. You want to make sure it's going from A to B. And so that makes sure that element is really dealing with the website. Availability is about making sure that services are available, and so that when you go to a website, it's actually there and you can have access when you want to. So disaster recovery can come into this as well. We're making sure things are up. And so in our situation, it's obviously that cool stuff is available, and so the website's not down. All right, so then the final one is privacy, and so this is all about metadata. So we all remember hearing about how the government was going to steal all our metadata. So this is about the metadata. So Adrian, I can see you're attentive now. So tell us about metadata. How does metadata play out in Alice working with a website?
Metadata is just data and data. That's
Okay.
it.
All right.
And some of the data, if it's from a privacy perspective, if it has sufficient connectivity to the person, then privacy will kick in. We can look at Ben Grubb's case against Telstra, for instance. It was a metadata case.
Okay. Not familiar with it. I've heard of the Ben Grubb's is a reporter.
Yeah.
Yep. So the metadata in this situation is all about, so you do a DNS lookup to find coolstock.com to find out the IP, and then you do a TCP/IP connection and you send packets. So someone who, even if you encrypt that link, you're going over transport layer security, people can still tell that, one, you've done DNS lookup for that website, and they can see that you've then established a connection between your IP address and that IP address. So they can be pretty sure that you've in fact gone and looked at coolstock.com. So that's what privacy is trying to protect, though how you protect it is a difficult thing. So in summary, access control is making sure you can only do what you should be able to do. Authentication is making sure parties are who they say they are. Non-repudiation locks you in. Data confidentiality, it's encrypting stuff so people can't see what the actual plain text is. Integrity is making sure people don't modify stuff. Communications, there's no one intercepting in the middle. Availability, things are able to be accessed when you want to use them. The service is available. And privacy is, can you observe, do outside observations of the interaction and derive some sort of information. So those dimensions are ways of thinking about security. And so when you're looking at problems and designing applications, it's useful to try and think of things in those terms. Okay, another thing to think about when you're designing a service is permissions, roles, and authorization. And so you've got an object, say, and that's the thing you want to protect. And you've got no, this didn't translate well from Keynote to PowerPoint. All right, you've got an object, and then you've got an identity, and that's the entity like Alice. You've got the permission, which is, say, to update a item on a page. You want to do some action, and that you've got the permission to do that. A role could be deemed a group of permissions. So sometimes people mix up, like super user as a permission, when super user is probably a role, and the role has all these permissions, a whole stack of different permissions. So authentication we've already heard about. The next one down that's off the slide, off the bottom there, is authorization. And so authorization is about giving you a set of permissions. So saying, all right, for your identity on this particular object, we're going to assign a role. So we're authorizing you. So you can imagine it'd be like getting a written certificate, and here's your authorization to do these things on that object. And the last one, of course, is access control. So access control is using the authorization that you've been given, and after you've authenticated, to do the action on the object. And access control is the thing that's checking out to see if you're doing the right thing, and, limiting what you can do. Okay, and for instance, so the object could be coolstock.com, the identity could be Alice, the permission could be, say, read, write, access to her account details. Her role might be standard user. Authentication is maybe she needs a username and password. The authorization is when she first enrolled or registered, she might have been given those permissions. And the access control is enforcing that she only does what those permissions give her the right to do. Okay, so now let's move on to some cryptographic terminology. So we've got plain text, which is the text that you're trying to protect. Ciphertext is, say, the encrypted data, so it's the processed data. The algorithm, it's a step-by-step procedure to go from the plain text to the ciphertext. And you might use a key. The key is a way of modifying the algorithm so that you don't always end up with the same output. So it's a way of modifying the algorithm. And then security strength is the amount of security offered by an algorithm given a certain key. And an attacker is someone who's trying to break an algorithm or a system. And an attack is a method of doing that compromise. Brute force is a special type of attack where you essentially try every single combination, every single key, every single way of attacking. And a vulnerability is a weakness in an algorithm, protocol, or implementation. So let's have a think about this for a second. An implementation. So we've got transport layer security, and OpenSSL is an software implementation of transport layer security. There could be a bug in OpenSSL, and if that bug is in OpenSSL, then if someone else has got an implementation of transport layer security, then the implementation is not affected. So that vulnerability is just limited to that implementation. Or maybe the bug's actually in TLS, transport layer security. So if the bug's in TLS, then anyone who's implemented that algorithm, so all the implementations, they now currently got a vulnerability. They've got to deal with it. If, on the other hand, the weakness or the vulnerability is in the algorithm, then we've got this really massive issue of, say, anyone who's used, say, a hashing algorithm or a certain algorithm is completely blind. That could then have ramifications for the whole of the internet. And so we've seen at times things like SHA-1. There was a collision that was demonstrated, and so that suddenly showed that anyone who was using SHA-1 should stop using it. So that had ramifications for the whole of the internet, all devices everywhere on the globe. So different attacks or different vulnerabilities have different levels of scope and hence ramifications. So whenever someone says there's a vulnerability and waves their hands around vigorously in the air, you need to immediately start to think about, is it implementation, protocol, or algorithm, and to try and scope how big effect it is. Okay, so let's have a look at a very simple algorithm to explain these concepts. So we had Caesar ciphers, that's used quasi 2,000 years ago. The idea is it's a simple monoalphabetic substitution cipher where you go from, say, the alphabet on the top line and go to the alphabet on the bottom line. And those who have done history major are saying, hey, just simply didn't have to be simpler in their alphabet, which is true. So, but this is easy for us to handle. So anyway, so to encrypt, you go from the top line to the bottom line. And so A would become D, B would become E. And if to decrypt, you go from the bottom line back up to the top line. And so in this,
That wasn't the Caesar cipher. The Caesar cipher was a split of, it's a split between A would become maybe G, and then every other one would be after that. That is a substitution cipher, which is different from the Caesar cipher, historically speaking. I'm pretty positive. Simon Singh, go read Simon Singh's The Code.
I'll have a look afterwards. I've been explaining this way for the last decade. I'm prepared to be wrong. You should always be prepared to be wrong. Good find if you're right, which I dare say you are, because you seem very sure of yourself. Okay. All right.
Rob's father taught me.
Okay.
I think the Caesar cipher was a shift of 7.
So it was so they
Just read the other.
so they only had one key.
Yeah.
Way 7.
Yeah.
There you
Very
go.
simple.
So it's a simple substitution cipher with key 7.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So the plain text is Caesar. We're now going to have to change to simple monoalphabetic substitution, just for Adrian. And the ciphertext is that there. The algorithm is the concept of substituting letters based on the offset. So we've offset them, and as we've now found out, in Caesar cipher, we offset it perfectly by 7. The key is the amount of offset. The encrypt is the process of going from plain text to ciphertext, and decrypt is ciphertext to plain text. So I thought I had one more slide. We've lost a slide there. Actually, no, we haven't. I know what I've done. Here. So we're talking about security strength. And so security strength is another aspect. So for this monoalphabetic substitution cipher, we've got 20 possible keys, if you allow for the key being itself. And so you could say block base 226 is 4.7. So you could say the security strength of this cipher is 4.7. But the actual algorithm is vulnerable to a certain level of attack. So if in English, typically, Q is followed by U, and there are frequency effects where E is more popular than other letters. And because of that, the rate of our language is 1.3. And so if you did information theory, theoretic analysis of the language, about 1.3. So you can say that the actual security strength is really 1.3 bits, not 4.7. So security strength really comes down to the number of operations that you're going to need to do to break an algorithm out of attack. And so there are 2 different ways you could possibly do it. One is using classical computers, and that's what you can think of as classical cryptanalysis security strength. Or if you had quantum computer available to you, then you would be looking at the quantum cryptanalysis security strength. So assuming you have a quantum computer general purpose, then that is the security strength based on that type of computer. And of course the thing is that right at the moment those quantum computers don't exist, but they may exist. And so when you're thinking about it, you've got to start thinking about, well, how strong would something be, assuming you had one of those computers? So right, so they may exist in 10 to 15 years time. And there's prominent people who know what they're talking about in the face of in the area of quantum physics, and they've appeared in front of US Senate committees and such like, saying there's a 1 in 7 chance by 2025 and 1 in 2 chance by 2032. So 10 to 15 years sounds like a good bet. So okay. So Moore's law. So this line here talks about security strength and time. And so back in about 2010, the thought was that it was conceivable that people could put together computers that could break 80-bit security strength. that was the thought. Now, whether anyone really could do it at that point is a very open question, and most people say no, that is impossible, and even now it would be very, very difficult. But the idea was that as compute power increased, we always hear about like the power of CPUs increasing, and so that was going up essentially at a rate of small. So if your compute power increases, then the amount of security strength required to withstand an attack goes up at the same rate. And the ability, though, of Intel and other large chip manufacturers to increase the CPU power sort of leveled off a little bit in recent years, but then there's been a lot of new ideas on how they can accelerate things again. And so you could assume that human ingenuity will mean that it's going to keep on going up at that rate. And so certainly the NSA and NIST over in the US thought that. And so their guidance back a few years ago were that by about 2030, you really want to have 112-bit security strength. And then a year or two ago, they suddenly said, all bets are off, and let's not talk about this anymore. And I think the reason is because of quantum computing and quantum cryptanalysis, because they suddenly got worried that all of this is out the window, because if you have a quantum computer, then maybe the rules change. But it's still worthwhile thinking about that. You've got this when you're designing your system and thinking about the security strength of algorithms that you're using, you've got to be thinking, well, how far in the future do I want my system to still be secure? Okay. And so, assuming though that something bad happened, either that your algorithm was broken or it just it's getting old. It was really fine 10 years ago when you first deployed, but now the world's moved on. You need something called algorithm agility. And so algorithm agility is all around being able to switch out the algorithm that you use. So maybe when you're encrypting or in some way processing data, as well as having the cipher text, you might have the algorithm that it was processed with. Maybe even a ID number or something associated with the key that was processed with. The idea being that then later on, you can decrypt the data, you can change the algorithm. So if you then have two algorithms that you're using, and you've got the algorithm identifier stored with the cipher text, then when you read that cipher text, you can go, and I'll use this algorithm, not that algorithm. So it's about not hard coding the algorithms that we're using, and that will give you flexibility or utility. And so I guess this is really reiterating what I just said. So that you don't get locked into a single algorithm. And so if you do lock yourself into a single algorithm, then when you've got a change, like say SHA-1, it's a major crisis. And you don't want that. You don't want to have this massive code rewrite. And so an example is with for the Ethereum space, going back to what we're all interested in, you've got some message digest algorithms that are hard-coded into Ethereum, which are problematic. They've also got ECC codes that are hard-coded into Ethereum. They realise that they're specifically going to be hit when quantum computers become a reality. And so there's work underway on allowing for essentially use different algorithms rather than just ECC. Okay, so when I was talking about that security strength, I was also talking about how long is data useful. So that really is all about data life. And so how long, how long is some data useful for the people that you're protecting? And, it's like, in the government, you've got some official secrets act or something, and then someone 30 years down the road releases it, and it doesn't sound that bad after all. It sounds rather cute, but then some other stuff, it suddenly is really super critical. And then, so people, something that feels really important, and like your bank balance today might be something that you're concerned about now, and maybe in a year's time, maybe in 5 years' time. But maybe in 30 years' time, it won't matter so much. So you've got to really think about for your users, when you're designing an application or system, how long do they expect you to keep their data secret? Which is it's a really hard question because then you might be giving them a free app or something like that, or a $1 app, and indefinite is not possible because as you've seen, those algorithms, there's vulnerabilities in them, and the security, that security strength curve, required security strength is going up. So all algorithms that we're using today, by the time we're up to 2050 or 2060, are all probably not. So we should expect that. And as classical security strength as a guide, 112-bit security strength should be gone by 2030. And 128-bit maybe by 2040. But there's also some thoughts on that around how many atoms are there in the universe, and are we sort of starting to get visible? Yes, question?
When you say security strength, and you're saying 112-bit, I'm assuming that you're saying symmetric cryptography in that regard. Certainly not asymmetric, and certainly not elliptic curve.
Security strength, as I was saying earlier, was the amount of operations required to break. And so we need to get
But
the
they have
general,
different lengths. I mean,
that they do.
you
So
look at RSA, 4096 is no longer security strength.
yeah, and this is the thing.
Because I think it's
2048-bit RSA is 112-bit security strength, for instance, and whereas AES 128 is 128-bit security strength.
So it is actually symmetric key.
Yeah, you can think of it as operations. That's the best way of thinking of that is the number of operations you need to break the algorithm. Where the types of operations are actually different based on different types of algorithms. And you cannot just derive it from key length. We'll have to introduce all the algorithms first and then get back to security strength to try and compare them between algorithms. Because it does become, I mixed and matched my slides around to try and, because this is, the whole idea of data life is important. In some ways you can introduce it early, in other ways you need to know all the algorithms to have a good conversation to it. Okay, so there's data at rest, so that's the stuff in the database, and there's data in flight, that's when you're communicating it over a TLS and some other communications. And so sometimes people think, oh, the data, data in flight, well, we'll just have that maybe less secure because it's ephemeral, it just goes over and it's all good, so it doesn't really matter. And that's a mistake. So government authorities and police forces and other organisations have a habit of recording the whole incident or recording all the communication coming out of the house. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to say whether that's legal or not, but I've heard of situations where people have done, organisations have done that sort of thing. And then later on, they've then got all that data that was sent over some communications link, and based on some changes that have happened and vulnerabilities that have been found, they've been able to reprocess all that data and come up with a plain text. So you always have to assume whenever you've got some data in flight that someone's recording. Okay. Another context switch. So salts, nonces, initialization vectors, and identifiers. So these are things that again are going to be used in all these algorithms I'm going to talk about in the future. And so they're invariably big long numbers. And in these cryptographic systems, they're numbers that are 256 bits long, 128 bits, so they're really, really big numbers. And they're invariably used so that you can't, say, do a replay attack, or so you can't break the algorithm by having essentially all possible values. Remember how we talked about brute force attack? So a similar sort of attack would be you could look at all the different values of these initialization vectors, say, and then feed it into a system to try and guess what the key is. So this is a way, if you have a big enough number, then you can't do that, because you just can't have 256 possible items, because it's just too big. These numbers are all public once they've actually been generated. And, but the security of the system invariably relies on you not being able to guess them before they're generated. So salts are used to ensure that systems aren't susceptible to rainbow attacks. So you might have heard of a salted hash. And so the idea of a salted hash is that you have, rather than going from a plain text to a certain ciphertext, you have a range of values, and the range of values is so vast that you can't possibly have a disk array that can just look at the ciphertext and then work out what the plain text was. So that's what a rainbow attack is, and that's how you prevent it, is by having a solid rainbow. Initialization vectors. So there you might have an algorithm, and if you encrypted the same information each time, just with the algorithm, then with a key, then you would end up with the same ciphertext. So what you do is you have an initialization vector. So even if you've got the same algorithm and the same key, you'll end up with different ciphertext. You might also have identifiers. And so again, this might be, say you've got a key and you want to have a key identifier. So you remember how we said that as a way of doing algorithm agility, you can have plain text and then you can have ciphertext, and maybe you would have an algorithm ID and maybe a key ID with that ciphertext. Well, that key ID needs to be some big long number so you're sure that you're not going to ever have a collision when you generate a new one. And you don't want people to be able to guess what that key ID could be beforehand, because otherwise they may go down to an attack. So that's yet another situation where you want an identifier to be unguessable before it was ever created. And then you've got nonces, which are slightly different. So these are number onces. And so the idea is you have a non-repeating number. And so that's to stop replay attacks. So you might have a request, and you might put a nonce in that request. And the idea is that the server, it's there, it's looking at the requests coming in, and if it sees a request for the same nonce, number ones, then it says, I've seen that one before, and it throws it away. Okay, so the last part I'd like to cover today is about standards. And so there are a whole stack of standards, but there are some that are particularly important in the cryptography and security space. One of them is FIPS 140. So FIPS 140 is a standard put out by NIST, and the idea is you have these cryptographic modules. So they're these, could be a library, could be a bit of hardware, and it does the cryptography for you. And the idea is that if it's a FIPS 140 validated module, then the algorithms inside it have been implemented correctly. When that becomes a
Should actually be FIPS 140-2. There is no -1 anymore.
Yeah, there's probably it's okay.
I just gave an advice on this shit.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, FIPS 140 is still FIPS 140. Latest standard, and for that matter, I think they keep on talking about having -3 come out. I think that's a bridge too far for them. Anyway, the good thing about FIPS 140 is that if you get one of those FIPS 140 validated modules, then you know that they've had to put it through some test vectors, they've had to have some code review done. You know that the overall module is far more likely to be good and rock solid than if it doesn't have that certification. Common criteria is a way of evaluating the overall security of not only the cryptographic module, but the overall system. So it's far more all-encompassing. There's another thing called STIGs, which has nothing to do with Top Gear. When this first came out, all of us Australians on the Australian end of the conference call would burst into laughter, and the Americans would have no clue what we were talking about. But yes, so STIGs are essentially ways of making sure that you've set up a system correctly. That's what it's all about. It's a secure configuration guidance. But if you want to sell to a lot of US companies or US government departments, you've got to have STIG. There's also PCI and HIPAA. So PCI is payment card industry standard, and then you've got the health insurance portability. So it's another health standard. So it's all about data confidentiality and security, but there are heaps and heaps of these industry-based standards. So I've talked for a while, and I'll say 37 minutes. Are there any questions?
When you're talking about data agility and the future of quantum computing, you mentioned something about Ethereum looking ahead into that space and making more complicated layers of algorithms.
Yeah, what's all that about?
And are other cryptocurrencies looking at that as well, or is Ethereum really ahead?
I can't talk to what other cryptocurrencies are doing, but I know that with Ethereum at the moment, when you're doing, whenever you sign a transaction, you're signing it with a an EC256 bit key, and so using an ECC key pair, private key, public key. And so the idea is there's account abstraction changes, which used to be EIP86, and now have got moved forward to some other EIP, I can't remember what the number is. And so the idea there was that you could use a smart contract as your transaction verification claim. So you could somehow or other use that smart contract to verify that you are who you say you are, and so it would allow you to use different algorithms or different procedures, and maybe you could even have a multi-party transaction. Multiple people had to sign, like agree on the transaction, or maybe you could do other things. And so the EIP86 was going to let you do quite a few different things, and one of the problems it was going to solve was the quantum computing ECC problem.
The thing about quantum computing, I mean, there's only one algorithm currently that is quantum crypto resistant that's in the public, and that's Macauley's algorithm, Macauley's from UCLA. I think it's UCLA. It works on a lattice, and Ethereum is doing stuff with lattice. Cardano is another one, is looking at lattice implementations for quantum crypto resistance. NEO has announced that they are going to do something, but I don't believe that they have said they're doing something with the University of Shanghai, I believe, in this area. So the issue really comes about, we're currently, and if anyone has greater knowledge on this, please do, but I think we're only up to about, I think the Google machine does, it's a series of, so single machine I think is only working on around about 5 or 6 qubits at the present moment, but Google has been able to, through parallel computing, got their machine up to 75 qubits working simultaneously in this area. And that's the way it's been going.
Yeah.
ANU is a world leader in this area, and Westpac has invested in one of their spin-offs.
So my understanding is that the general, people, brains trust on this thinks that eventually we'll get to a point that we'll have a more small style, increasing power, but at the moment the fundamentals aren't understood well enough to start that, more small style increase in quantum computing power. So that's one thing. And another thing is the style of quantum computer needed to, say, break RSA and ECC is different to a general purpose computer, my understanding. Could be wrong, but that's my understanding as well. So there's quite a few things going on there. As far as the algorithms that are quantum resistant, so one thing with quantum resistance is it assumes you know what algorithms you could possibly come up with. And there have really only been 2 or 3 quantum computing or quantum cryptanalysis algorithms that have proved to be useful thus far. And they all came out in the mid to late 1990s. But someone could come up with a new algorithm that would then be useful for breaking other algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, the genesis paper in this is by Peter Schnorr, I think his name is, in 1996, when he was a crypto researcher at AT&T. And he proved in his paper that elliptic curve, integer factorization, a discrete logarithm, as well as the Diffie-Hellman key exchange mechanism, are all susceptible to quantum computing. So that's where this whole thing came about.
And so NIST are running, they're not calling it a competition.
No,
They're calling it a, because I think that they read that, so NIST is that US, essentially like Standards Australia, but over in the US. And so they're running, they ran a competition for symmetric ciphers, we ended up with PES. They ran a competition for hash algorithms, we ended up with SHA-3. And so they're not running a competition for post-quantum because they don't think that we all know enough. Not us, but the researchers out there know enough. I think, and so they've asked for comment. And so my understanding is that they've asked for people to say, here's what we think, is a useful algorithm. And so you can imagine though that they will probably come up with standards out of this whole thing. And I think they're aiming to have something done by 2021, so somewhere in that area. So, which would be good because you can imagine that, say, quantum does start looking real, possibly realistic, then changing everything across the internet from RSA, ECC, Diffie-Hellman to something else is going to take an awfully long time. So, yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions? Oh, you look like you've got both hands up.
Saying that, pretty cool. So, I mean, the post-quantum crypto standards at the study is starting, and they just had the first standardization like the past week. So it's sort of running parallel with the post-quantum crypto conference. So that's, it's the early days. They had, I think there's about 80 or so submissions of algorithms for that. So that's that early stages of things. So it is that couple of years of needing to do the analysis and work out which ones are actually the same, which ones are probably broken, and that kind of thing is where it's at.
Yeah, that's good to know. So in one of the talks I'll do in a few months' time, I'll talk about cryptographic algorithms and when you should start using them. And so there's typically, I like to have a 5-year rule, and that is that someone's come up with the algorithm and it's been available for international, people trying to break it. And the reason why 5 years is a good amount of time is it's enough time for the publicity to have gone around about it, and then someone to have started their PhD and then finished their PhD and released the paper. And so, 5 years is a good amount of time for a few people to have done cryptanalysis on it, released their PhD saying how broken your algorithm is. And there's been a whole range of these, lattice, a whole range of these lattice algorithms that have proven to be horribly broken. And so we've just got to wait, I think, 5 years or so before we'll know if we've got a good algorithm. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you everyone. Thank you for coming. And next week, Rob, who's down back there, is going to talk about peer-to-peer protocols, which should be very interesting. Thank you, everyone. That was good, Peter. Thanks, thank you.
Another time for another layer of yeah, in the proposals.
Initially, all they was just doing the ECC verification. So they won't put anything other than just let's do exactly what we're contract. And so, yeah, it's but I think what there's different ways of doing that. that knows that you have that kind of transaction. Doing something else if you can't.
Yeah, I think,
Stuff along those lines.
I think we need auditing